Week 4 of the college football season has come and gone. And what have we learned? Have we learned anything new? Are we more confused than we were before? I don't know where we're going, but it's getting crazier as we get further into the season, and it's just going to get better as we go. So sit back, gather round, grab a drink. Let's get through the 5 thoughts on Week 4 in college football. Thought 1 on Week 4 in college football. Well, we have to start with the Indiana Hoosiers. This team just came off what looks to me like the most dominant performance over a top 10 team since Ohio State last year against Oregon or Georgia versus TCU. But this was an absolute beatdown, folks. Indiana, it wasn't even close. They put Fernando Mendoza on the bench to start the fourth quarter. Can you imagine playing in a game against the top 10 team where you're sitting your quarterback to start the fourth quarter because the score is too far out of whack? Yes, folks, and it wasn't just Fernando. This offense looks fast as hell. It is just super speedy at all the positions. And the defense, especially the defensive line, man, this defensive line was just dominant yesterday. Illinois ended up with 2 yards rushing for the game. That's partly because Luke Altmaier took 27 yards of sacks. That's right. The Indiana defense had 7 sacks and 10 tackles for loss yesterday. This is going to be a theme that you're going to keep seeing through the 5 thoughts. But the bottom line here is, the way Indiana played yesterday against the top 10 team, this is the most dominating win of any team in the country through the first 4 weeks of the season. Indiana has the best, most dominating win against any team in the country. And you can't argue that right this second. Now, obviously, we're going to see a bunch of big games coming up next week, so that can change. And Illinois is probably a better team than they looked yesterday, and we're going to find out because they play Ohio State and Oregon coming up. So it's going to be real interesting to see, but I really, really was impressed with the way Indiana rolled out in that game. And Kirk Cignetti, man, he's not playing games here. He's putting his second-team quarterback in and scoring touchdowns. Hell, he almost put his third-team quarterback in and got a touchdown. He did put his third-team quarterback in and almost got a damn touchdown. So this is a really dominant team. We didn't know who they were playing, Kennesaw State and Indiana State going into this game. But, man, 63-10 is a dominating performance, and this defense is really good, especially in the defensive line. In this skill position, they were twice as fast as Illinois yesterday. And that's a real interesting stat of how fast Indiana looked on the field versus what Illinois looked. So I'm going to give Indiana the most dominant performance of the season to date against a team, especially a team in the top 10. And this was quite the beatdown. Thought 2 on Week 4 in college football. We're going to roll over to Utah, and for some reason why they got to start this game at 10 o'clock in the morning Utah time is just ridiculous to me. I don't like this at all. But what we saw Texas Tech get a 34-10 win over Utah, but this was an interesting game because really Texas Tech pulled this game out in the fourth quarter and, really took the hammer down on Utah when their quarterback, Morton, got injured. Yeah, Brew Morton got injured, and they had to bring in Will Hammond. And once Will came in, this game changed tremendously. Now, Texas Tech does look like probably the team that could win the Big 12. I like Arizona State still in this position myself, who got a big win over Baylor yesterday in the last play of the game. But anyways, you could say Texas Tech is definitely a front runner, if not the leader in the clubhouse, to win the Big 12. The problem is when you look at the stat line for Texas Tech, and yes, they won the game 34-10 against what we all thought was a pretty good Utah team going in, playing at home. But they turned the ball over 2 times with 2 interceptions. And they also had, 14 penalties for 122 yards. Texas Tech isn't going to win enough to get to the playoff if they continue to make those type of mistakes against other teams this season, which they do have some other teams on their schedule that are going to be a challenge for them. So I really liked what I saw, especially in the fourth quarter with Texas Tech. Up until then, it was kind of a snooze fest, which makes sense since it's being played early morning at 10 o'clock in the morning out there in Utah. And, it was a 10-3 game going into the fourth quarter. And then all of a sudden, Texas Tech blows up and scores up to 34. But this just really... Yes, Texas Tech won the game, but I really don't like the penalties and the turnovers that they had. They did get 4 turnovers. They gave the ball up 2 times, but you can't guarantee you're going to get 4 turnovers every game, and you can't turn the ball over. So good win for Texas Tech. It'll be interesting to see which team comes out of the Big 12 this year, and it's only going to be one team, folks. So whoever wins this conference is getting into the playoff. After that, no one else in this conference is going to make it. Thought 3 on week 4 in college football. All right, let's move down to Miami, where Miami ended up beating Florida 26-7 in a kind of a rain-soaked game for part of it. And honestly, Florida's offense has got to be up there with one of the worst pathetic offenses in the history of college football right now. I mean, this was really an absolute pathetic performance by Florida's offense. But Florida's defense and what we've seen in the last 2 weeks against LSU and against now Miami, this might be the best damn defense in the country, considering they're playing with literally no offense, at least no offense that can score the football. Florida can move the football sometimes, but they can't score the football. They have a hard time moving the ball all the time. But bottom line here is this defense really, really, shut down Carson Beck for a good portion of this game. What was Carson? He was 17 of 30, 160 yards and an interception, no touchdowns. Miami really got their running game going in this game, which is, a benefit for them. But at the bottom line here, 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter of this football game, this was a 13-7 game. Miami ends up punching the ball in to go to 19-7, and then Florida goes out on downs. And unlike LSU last week when they played Florida, it had a chance to punch it in to score an extra touchdown to get it to 27-10 instead of just 20-10. And then a lot of people had questions about the LSU offense because of it. I still think if they would have made that 27-10, less questions would have been asked. Bottom line is Miami doesn't do that. Miami goes in and punches that next touchdown in to make this a 26-7 game. But at the end of the day, when you look at the game and you go back and watch it, Miami really, offensively, they just weren't great. They were really good in the last 5 minutes of the game where they got the 2 scores. And they got one of those scores on a short field, literally no time left in the game, like a minute or so left. But Florida's defense was just tremendous. I mean, speed, they were stopping Miami when Miami needed to convert critical downs, and they couldn't convert them. They picked off Carson Beck, like I said. So overall, Florida's just really not a great football team offensively at all. But man, there's a lot of teams in the country that wish they had a defense like Florida, and they could put any offense with it. This might be a national championship contender, but they're not going to be as we speak. So the question is, where does Miami go from here? Obviously, they got a big one coming up with Florida State in just a few weeks. So I think the winner of that game is going to be the inroad to one half of the ACC championship game. We'll see how the other half breaks out, but I wasn't overly impressed with Miami, but rivalry game in the state of Florida, always tough. I thought this was going to be an under game, and it sure as hell was the way it ended up. So I'm pretty okay with the way Miami won this game, even though it wasn't super pretty. Thought 4 on week 4 in college football. All right, let's move to Norman, Oklahoma. And we had the Sooners outlast the Auburn Tigers 24-17 in a really interesting game, but really a defensive struggle here for a good portion of this game. You had a Oklahoma defense who, depending on where you look, 10 sacks is what I've seen recorded. But if you go to ESPN right now, it shows they only had 9 sacks with 14 tackles for loss. It doesn't matter if it was 9 or 10 or whatever it ended up being. This was a dominant performance, especially by the defensive line of Oklahoma, in the way they were able to hold Auburn. But Auburn still, in the fourth quarter, ends up taking the lead in this game at 17-16. And you saw Oklahoma come back down after that, get the touchdown, go for 2, don't make it, and then end up getting a safety on the next possession to make this a 7-point game, which just happened to cover the 6.5 line spread. John Mateer was 24 of 36 for 271 yards. He had 1 TD through the air and 1 rushing TD. So pretty good game. I wouldn't say Heisman Trophy game, but pretty decent game for John Mateer. But this really all boils down to one play in this game, which at the end of the day was the difference in the score of 24-17. I'm not saying that if they were to call this play a different way, that the score still wouldn't have been 24-17 or Oklahoma still wouldn't have won the game. But this controversial play with the way that they ran this guy, looked like he was running off the field, but he really stayed on the field. And then John Mateer threw that touchdown pass, 22 yards into the left-hand corner of the end zone. Then you had the SEC officials come out and say, yeah, it was the wrong call. So you really wonder what happens if they call that. And then at that point, we get another 15-yard penalty tacked onto that drive. Because remember, Oklahoma already had a penalty on that drive of 10 yards. So they already went back 10 yards. Now they would have gone back 15 more yards. Would they have scored, and could that have changed the game? So I don't know. I think it was kind of a shiesty move. It worked. They got away with it. Oklahoma wins the game because of it. At the end of the day, no one's going to say, at the end of the season, if Oklahoma, let's just say they won the national championship, no one's going to say, well, that play could have cost them the national championship. Bottom line is, it didn't feel like it was the right type of sportsmanship in the moment, but it is what it is. The SEC officials aren't going to go back and replay the game from that point. So bottom line here is Oklahoma gets a dominating win defensively. When I don't mean dominating on the scoreboard, I'm just saying, man, they really dominated this defense. This defense dominated. They held Jackson Arnold 21-32 for 220 yards and a TD. Overall, pretty decent game for Jackson Arnold, I thought. But Auburn's a pretty good football team, and they're going to be, a tough out for a lot of teams that they got to play coming up. And they're going to have to play, low-scoring struggle games here against Auburn because Auburn's defense is pretty good. I really wish we could see Auburn's receivers be more effective. They have a really good crew down there, and I feel like, we should be getting 330 yards passing out of this offense with that receiving core, but we're not. And it's tough against Oklahoma. So, all right, Oklahoma does win 24, Auburn 17, and a play that Auburn will go down in history saying was a controversial call and shouldn't have led to a touchdown and maybe could have led to Oklahoma's demise. Thought 5 on week 4 in college football. Let's take a look at this Michigan-Nebraska game for a minute here. This ended up 30-27. It was kind of an interesting game. Bryce Underwood, a very pedestrian game, 12 of 22, 105 yards, no touchdowns. He had 61 yards rushing and a touchdown. Beautiful, just where he took off right up the middle of the field, was able to get a big run on that and score a touchdown. Dylan Raioba wasn't bad either. What'd he go? 30 of 41 for 308 yards, 3 TDs and an interception. It really boiled down to, let's start here. That incredible play at the end of the first half with the Dylan Rioba throw, was that 50-some yards to end the half to tie this game at 17. You really wonder what Michigan was thinking there and doing there, and Michigan fans will have a lot of questions about that, but they'll have less because at the end of the day it was a win. But overall, I just don't see either one of these teams as playoff teams right this minute out of the Big Ten. And again, it's still early. We're only a third of the way through. But I think both of these teams, if you look at their schedules, could still go 10-2 or 9-3 potentially, which could be talking about them in a playoff conversation. But I just don't think they're playoff teams as we sit here today. But overall, pretty good win for Michigan. I will say this. Michigan's offense runs through Justice Haynes. That's right. He had, what did he have yesterday? 17 carries, 149 yards, and a touchdown. And really, if you look at the explosiveness of Michigan's offense, it's really Haynes that's doing it. So it really how this team is going to go, in my opinion, is how Justice Haynes is going to carry the ball. And if they continue to give him, a good workload, 17 to 20 carries a game, I think Michigan can win a good vast majority of these games. Both these teams still have to play USC, which is going to be a measuring stick here for both of them coming up because USC looks pretty decent. Last night they had a big win against Michigan State, so it'll be interesting to see. I thought it was, a game I thought Nebraska needed to win for the program. I thought it was a program-defining win if they could have got it, and they didn't get it, which is pretty much the standard for the most recent, last 20-year brand of Nebraska football. But the bottom line here is it was a pretty entertaining game. And, I think Bryce Underwood is getting better and more comfortable, and we'll see how he continues to improve. And Nebraska's by far not out of this thing. They just need to make sure they play well, and they got that Penn State game. They can go win that baby, and they beat they beat USC, and then, Michigan's got USC and Ohio State, so they both got a kind of similar schedule. They both play a lot of the same teams, it looks like, outside of that. So we'll see what ends up happening with these two, but I just don't see either one of these teams, as it looks right now, as college football playoff contenders. Extra. Well, folks, I saw a barn burner of a game yesterday over in Muskingum College against the Wilmington Quakers, and this thing turned into a shootout. Muskingum ended up winning to break my heart, 56-49. Wilmington had the ball late in the game, ready to go down and tie this game up at 56. I think they had a first and 10 from Muskingham's 20-ish yard line. They ended up getting 2 false start penalties and a loss on the play. It ended up being 4th and 28, and they just couldn't convert that down in distance. So Muskingham ends up pulling out a 56-49 win over Wilmington College. Wilmington starts off at 1-2 for the season. They got a big game next week against Ohio Northern at home. And Muskingum rounds up to 1-1 for the season. Quick hitters. Let's talk about some quick hitters that we saw yesterday. And the first one I want to talk about is Arizona State outlasting Baylor yesterday, which started out as a defensive struggle. This game was a real low scoring for a vast majority of the game. Fourth quarter, it popped out a little bit, and we ended up with Arizona State kicking a last-minute field goal to beat Baylor 27-24. I thought both of these teams' defenses played better than I thought they could play against each other. I thought this would have been a little bit more of a high-scoring game. Sam Leavitt and Jordan Tyson is quite the duo combo, and they need to find another receiver to go with Jordan Tyson because, man, the kid's getting a good workload, and he can't take all the coverage all the time and make all the plays. But he did yesterday. So great win for the Sun Devils. Let's talk about Missouri Tigers in South Carolina. Missouri ended up pulling this baby out 29-20. I quite frankly thought they probably could have won by more, but South Carolina just isn't a very good football team right now. Lenore Sellers is an okay player, but he's not the player that we were sold the bill of goods on at the beginning of the year and first pick and this kind of stuff and da-da-da-da-da. He's just not, folks. He's a 2-inch taller version of J.T. Barrett, and quite frankly, I tell you, J.T. Barrett was a better quarterback than Lenore Sellers. But the bottom line is they got 2 losses now. That's South Carolina, and Missouri has none, and Missouri looks to be like a hot rising team here in the SEC. We'll see where they go moving forward, but great win for Missouri and the transfer quarterback from Penn State. We saw Iowa outlast Rutgers Friday night, 38-28, and Iowa has done something, folks, that I don't know that I've ever think we've seen before, and that's right, that is score touchdowns. And they did very well on Friday night. And Mark Gronkowski was 12-18, 186 yards throwing the ball, but he had 53 yards rushing and 3 TDs on the ground. And Iowa has a little bit of an offense to go with the defense. Ole Miss goes in after that win over Arkansas last week. I thought they might have a little bit of a down game against Tulane. Well, I was wrong about that, folks. Woo! They went out and beat them 45-10, and Tulane's a pretty good football team, but they weren't yesterday. Ole Miss just shut them down in every aspect of this game. They couldn't get the ball going, and Ole Miss drills an out-of-conference opponent, an American Conference opponent, so you know it's a tough team to play. This drills them 45-10. Another thing we saw yesterday was, that's right, Notre Dame getting their very first win of the season over Purdue. The thing is, yeah, they scored 50-some points, I think 56, but they gave up 30 points to Purdue. And I'm not so sure that Purdue's the kind of team yet that you give up 30 points to at any circumstance if you want to be a top contender in college football. So I'm a little worried about Notre Dame's ability to play defense all of a sudden, which I thought was going to be a strong point of this team. I'm not so sure Jeremiah Love here is getting the workload that he should probably be getting. I'm not exactly sure what's going on at Notre Dame, but bottom line here, they got to win. But this is going to be a tough road to get to the playoffs. And I'll tell you in another show, but I don't even know that if Notre Dame can win out, that they got a chance to be in the playoffs. Another American Conference team that came to work yesterday, that's right, the Memphis Tigers. They went and beat Arkansas 32-31 in a very, very surprising victory. Because I thought Arkansas looked pretty good the week before against Ole Miss, even though they lost that game. And the fact that they came out and lost this game to Memphis, who's a great team in the American Conference, but shouldn't be beating Arkansas in the fashion that they did. But we're going to give it up to the American Conference and the Memphis Tigers on a great win. What wasn't a great win, after my little short on how great Cal could potentially be this year, and Segapalute as a superstar freshman quarterback, they went on the road yesterday to San Diego State before they got into more conference play, and I thought that Cal could, make a sneaky run to the ACC championship game. If you see their schedule in the ACC, it was really favorable. They didn't play any of the top 4 or 5 teams. Well, at least top 3 or 4 teams in the conference. But instead, they ran out to San Diego and took a 34-0 beatdown at the hands of the Aztecs. And quite frankly, folks, it wasn't even that close. Let's talk about the last team here that shat the bed yesterday, and that is the Toledo Rockets. Oh, my God, folks. We had Toledo as one of the teams that we thought could make it to the college football playoff with this team. They had Kentucky in the first game of the year. They played them tough. They lost by 8. I thought they could have won that game, but they didn't. They ended up drilling Western Kentucky pretty well, which is a pretty decent football team. And then they get to play Western Michigan, and they end up losing, shotting the bed, just crapping all over themselves. Quite frankly, as an Ohioan today, I think we should just annex Toledo back into Michigan. That might be where they want to be, but they couldn't beat a directional Michigan school yesterday in a game they should have won, had to win, and needed to win to keep any playoff hopes in this MAC conference alive, and those are gone, gone, gone. I hope you enjoyed the show today. 5 thoughts on week 4 in college football. Stick around. This week we got the Baker's Dozen poll. That's right, my top 13 teams in the country. That will be releasing on Tuesday. We'll also do our weekly predictor show and some betting lines that I like going into this week. That'll be on Thursday, the weekly predictor show. I like to release some of the betting lines as little shorts throughout the week, so you'll see those on Wednesdays or Thursdays as I get them done and look at the lines and make a good decision. This week, we're going to also put in a new show. Not a new show. I don't want to say new. We're not going to do it every week. But we're just going to put in a show here tomorrow. That would be on Monday. And we're going to call it re-ranking the conferences. That's right. I ranked the conferences at the beginning of the year, and heaven forbid I wasn't even close. I had Clemson winning the ACC, and so did everyone else, and especially even Phil Steele here. You know, this is just a crazy year. So we're going to re-rank the conferences, and we're going to look at where we are going into week 5, who I think is the best teams in the conference, who can make the playoffs. So I'll be releasing that on Monday here, which is tomorrow, and we'll see exactly where we look going into week 5. But I'll tell you this, whatever I tell you in week 5 will probably change by week 9 with the way this season has already started to progress. So, all right, well, I hope you enjoyed the show. Please leave a comment. Don't forget to subscribe. Help us out. Like the channel. Hit the little thumbs up button. Whatever you can do for me. Make a comment. Tell me where I'm wrong. You know I'm an idiot most of the time, so it'd be nice to hear from you telling me that I'm an idiot. So, anyways, gather round in ALTT. We'll see you Monday with the Re-Rack Show.